of prison. Cardinal George Pell is free after Australia's highest court overturns his conviction for child sexual abuse. An optimistic tone. The White House is starting to offer some glimmers of hope in the fight against the coronavirus. Politics and the pandemic. Voters in Wisconsin head to the polls on primary day, why results may not be announced right away. And leading the Archdiocese of Washington, Archbishop Wilton Gregory tells us about fighting COVID-19 while being the head of the church in the nation's capital. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, April 7, 2020. And thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. In a unanimous decision today, Australia's highest court overturns Cardinal George Pell's conviction for child sexual abuse. The former Vatican treasurer was released after more than 13 months in prison for 5 alleged counts of sexual abuse. Throughout the entire ordeal, the cardinal maintained his innocence. In a written statement today, Cardinal Pell said in part, "My trial was not a referendum on the Catholic Church, nor a referendum on how church authorities in Australia dealt with the crime of pedophilia in the church. The point was whether I had committed these awful crimes, and I did not." Joining me now by Skype is Edward Condon, D.C. Bureau Chief for Catholic News Agency, as well as a canon lawyer. Ed, thanks for joining us. So great to see you.
Pleasure to be with you.
So, and I know you've been following this case and its appeals. What exactly did the High Court say today in its ruling?
Well, the High Court in Australia returned a ruling that basically affirmed much of the criticism that was present in the dissenting opinion of the Court of Appeal level in Victoria, which is that the jury that convicted Cardinal Pell did so on the testimony of a single witness accuser. There was, in the words of the High Court, no evidence whatsoever supporting his claim that the circumstances, of the alleged offense simply didn't stand up, that the time and place that he was supposed to have committed these acts of sexual abuse seemed wildly improbable, and that there was no corroborating testimony. On the contrary, there was a lot of testimony putting Cardinal Pell elsewhere at the time this was supposed to have happened.
Well, I know Cardinal Pell's conviction divided opinion in Australia as well as internationally. Something he alluded to in his statement saying, quote, "I hold no ill will toward my accuser. I do not want my acquittal to add to the hurt and bitterness so many feel. There is certainly hurt and bitterness enough." What was the reaction? What has it been to his release?
Well, I think the reaction has been divided in Australia. Culturally, Cardinal Pell was and remains somewhat of a divisive figure. But even amongst those who are not naturally sympathetic to him, there has been a growing groundswell of criticism against the jury decision that convicted him in the first place. Even those who perhaps in their heart of hearts would have preferred to see Cardinal Pell remain in prison, I think, are not able to mount much, or at least haven't yet mounted much of a theoretical critique of the legal decision of the High Court here. I think everyone accepts that really this is the right decision for justice.
Ed, what do you think is next for the Cardinal?
Well, I think he's going to be taking some well-deserved time off and readjusting. We had the joy of having the first interview with Cardinal Pell after his release from prison at CNA, and he told us that the first thing he was looking forward to was celebrating his first private Mass. He's obviously been unable to celebrate Mass while he was in prison for over a year, and that he's very much looking forward to celebrating Easter as a free man. That what he told us was that the Triduum is a special time for every Catholic, and for him it has a special significance this year.
Have you heard anything from the Vatican on this?
Yeah, the Vatican released a statement this morning welcoming the decision, affirming that they had always had confidence in the Australian judicial system, that it would reach the right conclusion, whatever that may have been for the case itself, and expressing solidarity, of course, with victims of sexual abuse everywhere. That this is something that both Cardinal Pell, the Holy See, and the bishops of Australia have been keen to underline, which is the Cardinal Pell case was very much a case about the case against Cardinal Pell, and the decision is about that. But it in no way undermines the Church's commitment, or indeed the sympathy the Church has with victims of sexual abuse, that this remains a very serious issue and one that Church leaders everywhere are committed to address.
Well, Ed, thanks so much for your analysis. We really appreciate it. Edward Condon, D.C. Bureau Chief for Catholic News Agency.
Thanks for having me.
With just days to go before Easter, signs of hope. While the coronavirus is still plaguing the globe, U.S. officials say if Americans keep practicing social distancing for the rest of April, some places may be able to slowly reopen. U.S. officials are watching to see how China and South Korea handle reopening their societies. At the same time, no one can put down their guard. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports.
The pandemic remains a deadly enemy. President Donald Trump cautioned Americans, prepare for the worst, but look for the light.
Again, we're going to have a rough week. We're going to have maybe a little more than a week. But there's tremendous light at the end of that tunnel.
As Americans practice social distancing, the hope is it will end the virus's reign. That with added advances in medicine.
There's so many things happening with therapeutics, with vaccines.
The disease that has forced people to stay home, cost jobs, shuttered schools, closed churches, physically separated loved ones, and altered life as we know it, has also brought about the best. Medical professionals are stepping out of retirement to help.
The thing that's different about it now is because we're all under not only duress, but we're under threat. More than any other time I can remember in emergency medicine.
And now, with Jesus' resurrection about to be celebrated across the globe, the urgent message, don't let up.
We need to take care of each other now as Americans and do everything that's in those guidelines.
So we just got to realize that this is an indication, despite all the suffering and the death that has occurred, that what we have been doing has been working.
And even as the White House battles the virus, the day-to-day business there still goes on. Making other headlines, Stephanie Grisham is leaving her job as White House press secretary to return to the East Wing as First Lady Melania Trump's chief of staff.
And that was Owen Jensen reporting for us tonight. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the price tag for another coronavirus rescue aid package could easily surpass $1 trillion. That is in addition to the $2.2 trillion already allocated for COVID-19 support. Correspondent Eric Rosales reports from Capitol Hill. Eric?
Oh, yes, Tracy. The bargaining continues. In the Senate, Florida Republican Marco Rubio says that he and other leaders are currently working on a bill that they plan to bring to the Senate floor possibly for Thursday for a voice vote. Senator Rubio says that this is good news for businesses out there. He wants an additional $250 billion for businesses in order to survive this coronavirus crisis.
We're going to have to go get more money. Everybody in Congress knows that, and we're working on that now to make sure that happens. So don't lose hope. It will get better every single day. We are not going to leave small business behind.
Aimed at helping workers at small businesses, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell announced an unusual move today. He says, quote, I will work with Leader Schumer and hope to approve further funding for the Paycheck Protection Program by unanimous consent or voice vote during the next scheduled Senate session on Thursday. The announcement of an unconventional vote in the Senate is designed to get more money to small businesses, even when the Senate is out of session.
Remember, not all heroes wear capes. Some wear masks, some wear scrubs.
And small businesses are just one part of the economy lawmakers in both parties are working to protect. Today, 4 Democratic senators joined Minority Leader Chuck Schumer pledging a boost in money for frontline workers.
We have janitors who disinfect our medical facilities, truck drivers who deliver supplies where they need to go, and many more. They will all be entitled to this premium pay.
The Democrats' plan for premium pay for essential workers includes an increase of up to $25,000 from the start of the public health emergency through December 31st, and a $15,000 recruitment initiative for medical workers.
We all know that in order for us to remain in our homes safely, there are millions of people who are going to work every single day. It's critical that these individuals be compensated accordingly.
And in more bipartisan support, Vice President Mike Pence, who heads up the coronavirus task force, he plans to meet with House Democrats and Republicans on Wednesday and then do the exact same thing on Thursday with senators. So the work continues right here on Capitol Hill. Tracy?
Okay, thank you, Eric. Correspondent Eric Rosales reporting from Capitol Hill. Today's Wisconsin presidential primary is back on after the state Supreme Court ruled the governor did not have authority to postpone it. Voters ignored a stay-at-home order to cast ballots. However, some election volunteers didn't show up over fears of getting the coronavirus. Instead, local police and the National Guard helped run voting sites. The results are not likely to be announced until next Monday. That's because absentee ballots postmarked today will still be counted. Courts in 2 U.S. states are allowing abortions to continue during the coronavirus pandemic. Governors in Ohio and Oklahoma attempted to ban non-elective surgeries, including abortion, during the fight against COVID-19, but pro-abortion groups appealed the decision. Coming up, the head of the Archdiocese of Washington tells us why he canceled public masses during the coronavirus pandemic. Plus, an update on the condition of UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, hospitalized after being infected by COVID-19. The Archdiocese of Washington is one of many around the country helping the faithful to celebrate and observe Holy Week while also observing social distancing guidelines. Archbishop Wilton Gregory celebrated Palm Sunday Mass at the Cathedral of St. Matthew the Apostle here in Washington, D.C., as thousands watched online. Due to coronavirus restrictions, this year's Holy Week liturgies are being live streamed online. Archbishop Gregory joins me now by Skype. Thank you so much for joining us today, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Tracy.
I know it's been about 3 weeks now since you announced that Mass is open to the public in the Archdiocese of Washington would not be celebrated because of public health and safety concerns. Can you tell us what that decision was like for you at the time and now especially during Holy Week?
Well, it was a painful decision because as a bishop, my job is to bring people to church, not to prohibit them from coming to church. But because we want to be good citizens and follow the directives of our duly elected officials and obviously follow the recommendations of the medical and scientific world, who advise us that in order for us to respond most effectively to this coronavirus, we should not be gathering in any great numbers. And so we decided that the best thing that we could do, although obviously a painful thing, would not to hold religious services. Obviously, and this week, which is the apex of our Christian calendar, so it's painful.
I know that you've also made an appeal to the faithful to continue to financially support local parishes while there are no in-person masses. Can you talk about just how important that is right now?
Well, the parishes and the institutions that provide religious services depend upon the generosity of the faithful. And when the faithful aren't there, the generosity lags. And it means that bills can't be paid, the salaries of parish workers can't be paid. And so it's very, very challenging for parishes to try to maintain their services, try to keep their employees fully employed without the generosity, the weekly generosity of the faithful.
I want to talk about this. Over this past Sunday, you spoke about what you called the stark absence of God's people in St. Peter's Square as Pope Francis delivered the Orbi et Orbi papal address and apostolic blessing last month, remarking on, quote, the silence of the moment. Any advice on what we should draw upon as Catholics as we celebrate Holy Week in the midst of this pandemic?
Well, one of the things, Tracy, that we listen to every Holy Week is the profound importance of silence. That when Christ himself was accused, after he responded, he then went silent. Because there are times in life when words are inadequate to explain or to describe the depth of feeling that the moment has caused us. And certainly the Holy Father standing in at the front of St. Peter's looking at an empty Piazza San Pietro, that was a powerful lesson because it's so contrary to what we are accustomed to seeing him, riding around in the Pope mobile and greeting people and kissing babies and praying with the crowds that came to pray with him.
It definitely is a tough time indeed. I want to switch gears just a little bit. You were named Archbishop of Washington a little more than a year ago, and at that time you pledged to rebuild trust. As you reflect upon this past year, how do you think that process is going?
Well, it's going, I believe, with God's grace, it's going forward. Tracy, trust is a very fragile gift. It can be broken very, very easily, but it takes time to reestablish. It takes time for people to come to trust religious leaders, government leaders, political leaders who have violated that trust. And so it's an uphill battle. But I might also say, here in the Archdiocese of Washington, I have sensed a spirit of generosity and openness. People want to believe. I hope that I can continue to give them reasons to believe and to trust.
Well, I know that you don't have much more time with us, but I do want to ask you this last question. You're the first African American to lead the Archdiocese of Washington. Can you tell us what that means to you?
Well, first of all, I'm honored that the Holy Father selected me. I'm honored and humbled when African American Catholics applaud and support me. But I'm also humbled by the openness that all of God's people here have received me. They want a bishop that will love them, serve them, care for them, laugh with them, cry with them, be amidst of their family and their faith life with them. And that's what I'm trying to do each and every day.
Well, we are so grateful that you're here with us. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Archbishop Wilton Gregory, thank you again.
Thank you, Tracy. God bless.
Pope Francis established an emergency fund yesterday to aid those being tragically impacted by the coronavirus. The fund will support the church on the front lines of major threats to people, particularly those in Africa and in Asia. This comes days after Pope Francis gave an extraordinary blessing to the world, asking the faithful to not be afraid and lose their faith. For over a month now, the Holy Father has offered his daily Mass for a specific prayer intention related to the suffering of the pandemic. Archbishop John Pietro del Toso, president of the Pontifical Mission Societies, joins us now from Rome. Thank you so much for joining us, Your Excellency.
Thank you for this occasion, yes, for this opportunity.
Can you describe the mission territories the fund was created for, and also what support do they need in the midst of this pandemic?
Yes, the fund was created in order to help, as you said, the mission territories. Mission territories are those territories which are under the competence of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples. And the Pontifical Mission Societies have the task to support spiritually and materially all these territories. So we say more or less little more than 1,100 dioceses or ecclesiastical circumscriptions in Asia, Africa, and Oceania, and a part also of Latin America. So all those territories who are still mission territories belong to the Congregation of the Evangelization of Peoples, and we have the task to support them. And especially our task is to support the ecclesiastical structures, that means the dioceses, the seminaries, religious communities, parishes, and so on.
I know that Pope Francis launched the emergency fund with a $750,000 contribution. Can you tell us where exactly that money is coming from?
Yes, you see, our mission since almost 200 years, we were founded 822 in Lyon. Our aim is to support, as I said, the young churches in mission territories. And all our money, we speak every year about $140 million, more or less, All this money comes from offerings from people, from Catholic people. They are offering the money in order to allow us to do this big work of support of the church in mission territories. This money especially comes from the collection all over the world is done at the end of October at the so-called Mission Sunday.
Your Excellency, quickly before we leave, I'd like to ask you this one last question. If people would like to help, how can they donate to the emergency fund?
You can find some indication in our website, fides.org, or because we have 120 national directions, you can find these also in the page of our direction of the US, missio.org. Missio.org. This is the our national direction for USA, who's collecting for us as all the other national directions.
Well, thank you so much, Your Excellency. We appreciate your time and all that you do. Archbishop John Pietro del Toso, President of the Pontifical Mission Societies, thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Officials in Japan announced a $1 trillion stimulus package to boost the economy, which has been reeling from the coronavirus recession. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe declared a state of emergency in Tokyo and other areas. It will last a month and includes a stay-at-home order, but it is not mandatory. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is in stable condition in a London hospital. He is still in intensive care, and his office says Johnson is receiving oxygen but is not on a ventilator. The 55-year-old is the first major world leader to be infected by the COVID-19 virus. Last night at the White House, President Trump said Americans are praying for the Prime Minister's recovery. After 2 months, quarantine in the Chinese city of Wuhan is about to be over. The communist authorities are preparing to lift the lockdown tomorrow, and police are patrolling the main train station in the city. Workers from other parts of China have been stuck in Wuhan but can finally now buy train tickets home. Wuhan, where the coronavirus pandemic first broke out, has been under quarantine for 11 weeks. Up next, how a diocese in New Mexico is helping one group especially at risk for COVID-19. As we've been learning, COVID-19 knows no bounds, and some of the most vulnerable to the coronavirus are Native Americans. The president of the Navajo Nation, which covers ground in Arizona and New Mexico, says COVID-19 cases and deaths are growing at a very alarming rate. Correspondent Mark Irons joins us now. Mark?
Tracy, according to a study from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, a high death rate among Native Americans from the 2009 H1N1 virus was largely because of health issues prevalent in Native communities like diabetes, heart disease, and asthma. Now, those concerns remain today in a part of the country where the Catholic Church is stepping in to help those in need. The CDC says Native Americans experience many health issues more frequently and more severely when compared with other Americans, making them susceptible to complications from the coronavirus. And according to the Black and Indian Mission Office, the quality and access to health care on reservations is poor, and more than 30% of Native Americans do not have health insurance.
The spread of disease is a historical problem for Native Americans.
Father Dale Jameson has worked with Native American communities for the majority of his 46-year priesthood. He serves in the Diocese of Gallup, created by Pope Pius XII in 1939 to minister to the high density of Native tribes in New Mexico and Arizona. In addition to the health concerns, Father Dale is witnessing the coronavirus impact on community.
It's really affecting the social fabric of the different tribes in different ways.
And the virus presents the latest challenge for Franciscan mission schools, educating Native Americans throughout the diocese.
I would say the spirit here among the staff is definitely service.
St. Francis of Assisi School in Lumberton, New Mexico, where I taught as a second-grade teacher in 2012, faces annual struggles with funding and volunteer staffing. But even during the pandemic, it continues to serve. Following social distance guidelines, the teachers have prepared remote learning packets and needed meals for families to pick up. The principal, Madeline Lyon, says the mission will continue.
I know this school will reopen, and that is through the grace of the Holy Spirit.
St. Francis School serves people from the Ikaria Apache Nation. Now, this weekend in Navajo Nation, a 57-hour mandatory curfew is being initiated because tribal leaders say many people aren't abiding by the stay-at-home order. Police say they will issue citations, fines, and detain people if they do not abide by that curfew. Tracy.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Very important report. We appreciate that. Correspondent Mark Irons reporting. And a reminder, EWTN airs Masses throughout the day. Mass airs at 8 a.m., noon, and 7 p.m. Eastern from Our Lady of Angels Chapel in Irondale, Alabama. We are also airing the Pope's Daily Mass, and we will have special Holy Week programming this week. In addition, we are offering Eucharistic adoration from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. on our website, EWTN.com. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. We're back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night and God bless.